Alright everybody, back one more time for part 3. We are going to start assembling. About ready to drop the crank in it right now, torque down the mains. However, I have to go pick up a more modern rear main seal for this here in a little bit. Local AutoZone has it in stock, so I'm just going to run down and get it. Because we're not putting the rope seal in this engine. It's not happening. Rope seals suck. They're hard to get sealed up. I can do it. I don't want to. Just going to put the better seal in it and be done. Because I don't want to have risk of revisiting that. Because it's a two-piece deal. You got to drop the main cap out for replacement. And once this is together, it's staying together. So, getting ready to put the crank in, like I said. Because I can put the rear main in. Get this pointed down here. I can get this rear main in after the fact. Got a couple things that have to be done to the sides as that's going in. There's some RTV that has to go in there. And then once that's all torqued down, then it's sealed. But because because I can sneak the seal in with the crank in here, I'm not worried about the rest of this. I'm going to go ahead and install it all. And I just won't torque the main down. I'll wait till I get ready to put the seal in later. But I can move forward to flipping it over. I can then move forward to flipping it over and putting the pistons and rods in it. So, give me just a minute here and I'll start putting this together. Alright, quick note here. I do use assembly lube often. However, it's a little colder out. There's no reason I can't assemble this with motor oil. Because I'm going to prime the entire oil system before this thing fires up. So, I try to avoid using this on stuff like lifters, especially because the bottoms of the lifters are going to get a moly lube. As a matter of fact, let me, when the camshaft goes in, the camshaft gets its own moly lube. And it's a thick, it's almost like a wheel bearing grease. You can see it just kind of sloshes around in there. It's thick. This is what goes on the bottom of the lifters that touch the camshaft. It also goes on all of the lobes of the camshaft, not on the cam journals. The cam journals just get a little light motor oil. Because you want the things that are going to be spinning under pressure to be turning smoothly as you're working with the engine. Because you want to be able to feel when things start to bind as you're tightening it up. Because you're constantly going to be moving the crank. I'll show you here in just a second. Because if you feel something funny as you're tightening the main caps down, that's the time to stop and investigate. If you don't, you run the risk of spinning a bearing on startup. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my little thing of 1030 here. And we're just going to give the bearings a nice liberal coating of oil. This is one of them things where you can't have too much on it. But you definitely don't want it dry. This is the part in the assembly where it's going to start getting really messy. Apparently somebody's in my driveway, or a leaf blew across in front of my camera. Either way, I'm checking it. Let's see. Who's in my driveway? Oh, just my car cover this time. Cool. Alright, let me grab this crank. And you want to just set the crank straight in there. Obviously with your fingers out of the journals. Okay. And You see, I can grab the crank and just give it a nice little turn. That's what I want. I want to be able to feel that it turns smoothly. And I'll put a little oil down through these holes. It's going to start dripping on the floor at some point as I'm assembling this, because that's what happens. And that's okay. Just be prepared for that. Have some pig mat or some cat litter or something down. That way you can clean it up good. Alright, now I'm going to start getting the caps in there. And just like the first time, the process is much the same. Just going to tap it down in there after you, but this time you're going to oil it. Oil. I still got to clean these real quick, but I'm going to slap some oil in there and then stick them in there. So give me just a second. I forgot I didn't clean the plastic gauge out of those. Nice thing is it comes right out. You just barely touch it with your fingernails. Stuff you gotta watch, because if you forget this, then you've got plastic gauge going around in the engine, in the bearings, and that's no good. You don't want that. You don't want any foreign material in here except for the oil. Again, anything you have going around inside the engine gets stuck in these bearings immediately. Best oil filters in your engine are your bearings and your lifters. And that's because they will absolutely catch everything. Alright. There you go. Again, just put a little oil on it. And again, this one is not getting torqued down, but it is going. I am going to run the bolts down. Right after I drop the bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of just slamming these home gently. And I'll bring you right back. Alright, now these are all run in by hand. If you've done your job cleaning all of the threads and the bolts and all the parts, everything will assemble by hand, literally almost to the point where you can get ready to just torque it down. So just that easy. They run in. So now all I have to do is I'm going to start from the center. First I'm going to do is, now that I have these all finger tight, where I can't turn them anymore, now I'm going to grab a crank. Okay, and I still have good movement. And I'm going to start here. I'm going to torque these, and as I torque them, I'm going to turn this, and I'm feeling for any weird binds. If it binds up again, that's the time to stop. There's no reason to go any further, because that's the point where you need to investigate. So let's see, my torque specs on the bottom of this engine, I believe are 55, except for the rear main cap. I think the rear main cap gets more, but I'm not too worried about that at the moment. Obviously, I still have to get the rear main cap, or the rear main seal. Let's see, yeah, crankshaft bearing, cap, crankcase, all except rear 50 to 55. So we'll set this thing to 55 and we're gonna center down. Let's see, 50. That's 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now again, no problem rotating this, very little input from my hand to turn it. Okay, we don't want it to click yet, I just kind of want to get these cinched down a little bit. Okay, still turns free. Go slow. You want to sneak up on it. lets the oil on the threads do the most work. And so far I have no problems there, so I'm going to move to the next one out. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to cinch it down. Turn, good. Okay, no binds. Then we're just going to repeat the process all the way through the bottom of the engine and make sure that we don't have anything weird come up, because it will immediately. It'll suddenly be like, oh man, it's tight. So good there. Now, because I'm not torquing the rear right now, I'm just going to go ahead and torque the front, and then I'll be done with that later when I go to get the seal. Cinch it down, give it a little twist, give it a spec, give it a little twist, and all is good. If I could get a good enough grip on this, I could grab it and it would just spin. And that's what you want. That's a well-fit crank. It's a nice straight bottom. And that's the bearings all within spec. It makes a big difference. So now what we're going to do, pull pin on this, and we're going to start slamming pistons home. Gently. Don't want to slam them in there too hard. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab hold of one of these and go ahead and get the bearing insert back in the bottom and the cap apart. Not in that order, because I got to have the cap apart to put the bearing in. And then we're going to use this right here. And this is a ring compressor. This is a cheap one you can get anywhere. Pretty much every parts store will have with this. Harbor Freight will have this. And it goes over the piston, and you crank it down, and it compresses your piston rings. And then that lets you install the pistons. So give me 1 second to get set up here, and then we'll start running them home. Okay, now before these start going in, I want to show you a few things here. You want to have the crank down. So let's say I'm working on this cylinder here. I want to turn the crank so it's as far down as I can get it, and I can aim straight at it. And I'm going to put a couple little pieces of plastic or rubber over the rod bolts. That way it doesn't scratch the crank on the way down through there. And then when I compress that and I tap that all down through there, since I'm aiming at that, that should come down right here into its journal, and then I can install the cap and then move to the next one. It'll just be a matter of turn the crank, turn the crank, turn the crank, and the same deal. As you're turning it, you're going to be feeling for binding. Now as you're going, obviously it's going to get stiffer and stiffer and stiffer as you put more pistons in here, because friction, because the rings are going to be building up. But they should go up and down fairly easy. You should be able to take your hand onto your flywheel and just turn your engine. I'm going to go ahead and get these prepped. I've got the rod caps loose. I'm going to get them off this dirty floor and give them one last little clean. Start popping the bearings in, and then we're going to run them all into the holes. Alright, so right now I've got the 4 that are for this side of the engine in here. Now, in most cases, pistons are going to have a mark on the top of them that denotes which direction they go. In this engine, it doesn't matter. The pistons are the same all the way around. So they don't have a direction. The rods, however, do. And in this particular instance, not only is there a dimple in each one of these connecting rods, but there's also a tiny little oil squirter hole. And the dimple on this side of the engine needs to face the front, and the oil squirter needs to face up towards the camshaft. On the other side of the engine, the opposite is true. The dimple faces the back, and the oil squirter still faces up. Now, this is unique to a Buick. It's not something that most engines or Most engines have a front, and that's it. There's no, you don't rotate them back and forth. So there's something that's kind of only this engine or this engine family. But there's always going to be something that tells you which way it goes. Pay attention to that, because if you get it the other way around, not only do you chew up bearings in the bottom of the engine, but not all these connecting rods are machined with the same amount of space on both sides, because these are designed to run next to each other. The inside is actually shorter than the outside. If you get those backwards, it fights the piston in the block, because then it's trying to push each other apart. It's bad. So what we're going to do now is, you see I've got these on here. This is just heat shrink. I just shove it up on there. It stays on there, but it keeps me lined up and it keeps me from scratching the crank when I'm shoving this down through there. I'm going to oil the pin, because you want to make sure the pin's good and oiled. I'm going to oil all of the rings, and then I'm going to, well, after I've installed the bearing shell, and then I'm going to oil it and install this, just like I did when I was demonstrating the installer. We're going to show you how it cranks down, and then you just give it a light little tap and everything goes down in the blower. The key is plenty of oil. Again, you don't need, it doesn't need to be dripping. And it doesn't have to be super heavy here. It just has to be lubricated. I'll get the bearing shells out here so I can get them ready. I hate trying to pull them out of their plastic because they're always stacked together. They can come out of their plastic all in a stack, and I don't want to scratch them up. I also don't want to drop them. Once you drop them, they're pretty well shot. Something else you'll notice, especially on well, not especially this engine, is the bearing also has an oil squirter hole location opposite of the tang. So you really can't screw these up. They only go in one way. Same thing like with the mains. Start the tab inside. Start the tab inside of its spot, and then just shove it down in there and use your fingers to feel to make sure it's down below the surface. All good. Awesome. Alright. Now, before I shove this in here, I want to discuss where these gaps are supposed to go on these rings. You want them kind of 90 degrees from each other. So I've got the second ring here. The top ring will have its gap over on this side, and then the oil rings will have gap and gap. But you don't want them ever lined up with the wrist pin, because that if you line them up with the wrist pin, it causes blow by. You can, because the piston is rocking right there, and its change in direction will flex the end of the ring. What did I do with my installer? Boy, I am like the absent-minded professor right now, I'll tell you. Okay. These garage gremlins are getting bigger. Ah, there we go, found it. Stand by, technical difficulties. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to get this, you can see how it fits around, and it's going to tighten down. And it's going to squeeze all the rings around the piston. You want to make sure that when you're doing this, you can feel that the rings are not binding anywhere. And you want to make sure that this stays square, because if it doesn't and that lip rides up, it won't go into the block right. So make sure it stays square, and you give it a cinch down. And then once I've got this all oiled up, I'm going to slide it down in there. Alright, set the ring gaps back where they were supposed to go. Now I've got it all oiled up. And compress this back down. I'm going to do one for you guys on the camera. And then, because this is kind of tedious and repetitive, there's no reason to continue to do it on the camera for all 8. You'll get the idea after the first one. Okay, so we cinch that down. Make sure we're facing the right way. And we've got all kinds of lubricant on this. So we want the piston to slide down in there nicely. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one out. I am afraid they are going to start falling, and I do not need them for demonstration now. So I'm going to stick them down here and ready them for their turn. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to push on the top of this piston. Soft face hammer or soft handle, and just give it light taps. You also want to feel and make sure none of the rings are popping out as it's going in. It shouldn't take a bunch of taps. It should be real nice and easy, just like that. Now I'm gonna get you down here and get this oily glove off for a second. I grab the camera. And as you can see, I'm lining right up with the crank journal. I'm gonna give this some taps. And it just goes into its home. Just like that. And then all I gotta do is take these off, put a bearing shell in that, put it up there, and torque it to spec. Repeat the process 7 more times, all while making sure everything moves freely. Alright, and just like that, the bottom end is assembled. We have a short block. So I'm going to turn this here, and you'll see I have pink marks on all of these. That lets me know that I have torqued those bolts already, and I do not need to do anything further. Now the only thing left to do at the bottom of this actually will be the rear main seal, and then torque these two, and then the oil pump pickup. Everything else is going to be up here. The next step is to go ahead and get the camshaft stabbed in. Test fit all the lifters first. Make sure they're all going to fit in their holes and be smooth. I've already done that, so I already know they're going to work. But light oil only on the lifter bodies, and the heavy moly lube on the bottom. I'll get to that just a second. As soon as I figure out, there it is. Okay, found the camshaft. One thing we are going to have to do is we're going to have to make sure that the camshaft is in the right spot. This one's pretty much going to be a stab it in, line the dots up kind of a thing, but there is the option to degree that camshaft to make it perfect. we'll touch that in another video. For this particular purpose, we're just going to go ahead and put the cam in, and I'll show how everything is set up so we can get quickly to getting this thing broke in as fast as we possibly can, because I still have to put the transmission together and things like that. So let me get things turned around here. I will there we go. Let me get things straightened around here real quick. Get the valve train components, get the cylinder heads and the gaskets and things over here, and then I'll get ready to put this together. 1 second. All right, now I've taken that lube, that heavy moly lube, that assembly grease that comes with the camshaft, and I coated the camshaft. And it doesn't matter how much you get on here, because it's all going to wear off in the oil and be gone in short order. You just want to make sure that everything is lubricated. And then you want to be careful as you're guiding it in. As you're guiding it all the way back, you want to support it so it stays off the bearings. It's ideal to have like a handle out here, but on this particular one, you can actually reach in here and help guide it over its bearings in the back. And now my hands are all slippery. So I'm going to get the glove off. I'm going to clean the snout up so I can get it back into its bearings without cutting my hand right there. And then we'll get into putting the rest of this together. Alright, well that was a bit of an adventure. Let me show you what I had to get done. The third cam bearing in was what was really hanging this thing up. And nothing I could do to turn that can. There was nothing I could do. It just locked solid. As a matter of fact, I had to put the old timing gear on the engine and use pry bars to pop the cam loose, because it just locked all at once as I was turning it. So I made a cutter cam out of the old one, and it is simply just grooves cut. I just was not aggressive enough with this journal, and for whatever reason there was a real big high spot on the bottom. I don't know if it was something to do with the block, or maybe I missed just a little bit as I was cleaning, or that's how the block is. At any rate, it's fixed now. I just had to get more aggressive with my cuts in that journal. I shoved this in there, turned it about 3 times, and pulled it out, and it was perfect. So everything's good now. I gotta change the sprocket. I had the stack built so I could have something to hold on to turn, but I can grab it here at the distributor gear and turn it now. So absolutely zero problems, and this is what you want. You want a nice, smooth turning camshaft. It should feel a little snug, but it should turn without any effort. You should be able to just put your fingers on it and rotate it. I'm gonna get the monitor for my kiddo turned down here just a little bit. So now that I am happy with the camshaft fit, I know the crankshaft is fine, I know everything else is good, it is now time to be able to move on. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this off. I'm going to go ahead and put the timing set on here that it is going on here, which is a, I believe it's a Cloy's. Yes, it's a Cloy's Performance Double Roller. So this is much nicer than the single row. A lot less friction, frees up a little bit of horsepower, and if I really wanted to, I could play around with advancing or retarding the camshaft timing with the lower gear because I've got, I think, -2, -4, depending on which side I flip it on, and then it's got a stock setting right there. So I'm going to put this one on the stock setting because this cam already has 4 degrees in it, standing straight. So I shouldn't have to mess with anything. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'll tell you right, it was a little scary when that cam locked up as I was putting it in there, because it's been a long time since I've had one get that bad. But then again, it's been a long time since I've actually replaced cam bearings and anything, because most things don't usually need cam bearings unless it's super high mileage or there's a cam issue. Okay. Now, this timing gear is slightly more press fit than the aftermarket one is. So I'm going to pop it off of there. And I'm just putting the pry bar in here behind it. Just enough that when I go on the end of it with the hammer, which is going to be a soft face one, it should pop that gear loose. And of course it's not going to. Oh, there it goes. So much nicer. Okay, so we want the dots on this one to line up this time around. We have to put the gears in the chains first. Once the gears are in the chains, then you can slide it all together as a unit. Now see, I need everything has to line up. So if you don't have the keyways lined up, the gears don't go together. Oh, look at me bumping the hammer. Oops. Huh. I'll give you guys seasickness before it's all done. I'm trying to reach through the tripod to do this so you guys can see it line up, but maybe that's not important since you know that the timing marks have to line up. I guess that's really all that matters here. Oh, it's so close. There we go. And then you got to kind of walk them back together. I think my crank keyway is... Alright, there we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Jeez. This was long-winded for no reason. Alright. I've got that back all the way. I'm just going to splash a little motor oil on the chain all the way around. Probably give it one full rotation with the crank. I'll put the harmonic balancer on there and turn it by hand. Let that oil. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to finish the stack. And then I think we can go ahead and start mounting the timing cover. And install the heads. So let me get the, let's see, we have fuel pump eccentric has to go on here first, but I gotta get this washer off. fuel pump eccentric. And then this one also has the distributor gear, and you can see where the wear pattern is from where the eccentric was riding on it for eons. Alright, so I got the washers. I gotta swap this big fat washer out underneath this bolt I had for these two here. That's the good and tight method. There is a torque spec there, but it's a real pain to hold everything still. And that's fine. It's not going to go anywhere. I've had engines that were well into the nines that were built with mostly impacts. So I torque most things. That just, I go till the washers start to flatten and then it's plenty. So don't judge me. You guys know you do it too. I'm kidding. Alright, so I'm going to put the harmonic balancer up on here so I got something to turn it with. I'm not done in here. There's a splash deal that has to go on, but I want to be able to rotate this. I want to pour a little oil. I'm going to get that cat hair out of there first. Jesus. Building an engine with cat hair. I can't do that. And just let it run down the chain. There's no rhyme or reason to this as to whether or not it's wrong. You could have dipped the chain in oil before you assembled it. You can use assembly lube here if you really wanted to. I just like motor oil. And see, I can turn this engine by hand, even though everything is in here except for the lifters at the very moment. And that's how it should be. There should be no reason why you can't do this at the harmonic balancer with your hands. Anything more than that and the engine's too tight. You want tight tolerances, but you don't want too tight. Too tight is bad. Too tight is heat. Too tight is spun bearings. Another cat hair. Jeez. Which is why we stopped. We didn't panic and we fixed the camshaft. And I'm basically looking for 360 degrees of rotation here. And I don't feel anything weird. Then I consider it pretty well good to go. Like I said, your hands are precision instruments. If you know how to listen to them, they'll tell you. You'll be able to feel little things. It's amazing. Kind of like when you're listening for noises. You really tune in on the noise. You realize just how much you can hear. Alright, so I got, I'm going to go ahead and line the timing marks back up because I'm satisfied, and the distributor and everything is going to end up being timed off of this, so I'll just go ahead and line it back up now before I put it back together and everything will be kosher. Alright, so there's one oiled up double roller timing chain, one assembled short block, camshafts in, gallery plugs are in. Always make sure your oil gallery plugs are in. The camshaft plug in the back of the block is in. So yeah, I think I can put the timing cover and the heads on. So let me get that set up and I'll be right back. Alright, now normally I wouldn't be putting RTV on gaskets like this because they're typically a dry fit. They're all good. This has dowels, so it's going to hold it in place. And your paper gasket really is just here to fill the difference in surface between the two pieces of metal you're bolting together. So a sealant in between this, if it's clean and free of crazy debris, they'll usually seal just by themselves. The problem is we're dealing with an engine from the early 60s and porosity has gotten the better of some of these areas. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to go ahead and do my typical alcohol on a paper towel or a lint-free rag and go over this area here, make sure it's perfectly clean, and then, contrary to most of the time I tell you guys no RTV, this is going to get some. I'm going to run an extremely thin bead all the way around this, especially around the water jackets. I'm going to try and avoid going through too much around the oil ports. They're smooth, everything's good right there. It's really the water jackets in this upper part of the timing cover area that's always a problem on these. You can see kind of down here where it started to pit a little bit into the aluminum. It's smooth. I've run a razor blade over this, but there are some pits and some voids, and it's going to be more than what the paper gasket's going to be able to take care of. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of that ready. I'm just going to run an extremely thin bead over that, and I'm going to basically glue this to it. The other side does not really need anything because the timing cover is brand new, fresh machined, should be perfectly flat. It's just the surface that's going to need the help. Plus it'll hold the gasket in place a little bit easier for me. So give me just 1 second. Alright, so this is just a towel with some rubbing alcohol on it. And I'm just going over, especially right here where there's some shiny oil on the front of the block. I don't want any of that. So I'm just going to keep cleaning it until I quit getting black on the paper towel up here. And the reason for this is because as long as this gasket surface is completely clean, it will absolutely seal. There will be zero reason why it won't seal. And it doesn't take much. Another pass or two and that'll quit being black. Make sure you keep flipping your towel because you got plenty of alcohol in here if you've soaked it. And you got plenty of clean surface. And where it really matters is only where the gasket's at. It doesn't have to be completely clean everywhere. You don't have to get down in here. Just where the gasket's gotta go. And I guess it's not a super necessary step, but I don't like oil leaks. So if you don't like oil leaks, like I don't like oil leaks, it's a super necessary step. It's worth the time to take your time. Why would you want to go back and redo this? That's more money spent. That's downtime. Right now is the perfect time to do it right. And that goes for anything. And I don't care if you're broke. I don't care if you're rich. There's no reason to have to do something more than one time. And I understand if you gotta like go to work and it was one of those temporary things until the next paycheck kind of thing. Man, I've lived like that my entire life. But fix that stuff right at some point when you possibly can, because it will come back to bite you. And then it costs you more money down the road. And if you're already pinching pennies, that's not the time to cut the corners. And the little stuff adds up. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this real quick. I'm going to put some RTV down there. I'm going to put this gasket on, and then we're going to go ahead and mount this timing cover. Alright, so I lied, but I have a very good reason. Here's the deal. I keep looking at this hardware, and I just look here. Look how pitted that bolt is. And these are the ones, I don't know how many of you are familiar with small block Fords or AMCs. I think there's a few other ones that run, some oddball ones that run the bolts from the water pump through the timing cover into the block. So you have multiple places where things of various liquids can leak past. Plus you have an extremely long small bolt. I mean, it's, I don't remember what size that is. It's tiny. I'm going to replace these. And the small ones need to be done. I'm missing 2 or 3 of these, so I gotta find. I'm going to the parts store tomorrow. I'm going to the hardware store tomorrow. I'm going to the parts store tomorrow to get some more brake parts cleaner. I'm going to the hardware store tomorrow to get more bolts for the Buick. I think that's a good place to stop for the evening. The timing cover's ready to go. I have the oil pump gears. I had to pull back out before I put this on there, but I have the front seal in there. I have to lubricate it. I gotta make sure I clean the harmonic balancer. And then I gotta make sure I got all the right bolts. I also just discovered I'm missing 1 medium length head bolt. But the nice thing is the head bolts on this engine are pretty much standard hardware. So the same place I'm going to get the rest of these bolts. I'm going to go ahead and get the 2 missing head bolts I've got rather than try to find them, because I don't even have a clue where they would be. They should have all been with this stuff. But that's how it goes. So, tomorrow, hardware, parts store. Back here, finish this engine. Guys, keep the shiny side up.